This is Eric. I apologize for being off in terms of my the schedule. It seems like the last 2 Mondays have had challenges with scheduling things. So here I am. I think we'll be on Mondays. And I'm working on a new platform here, so bear with me. I may share another one tonight. Today I woke up with this important, I felt like it was an important idea about listening. I realized a lot of our problems that we're facing is just the lack of listening, lack of understanding. I'm going to show the chat, so if there's anybody out there, you're welcome to let me know if you're seeing this and the audio's coming in and all that good stuff. Boy, where do I begin? I think I'll begin with some stories. And maybe you have experienced this, that when you're talking about a topic, let's say the topic of COVID or a vaccine or other issues, but this is where I've seen it most. People seem to be thinking about what they want to say before just listening to what you have to say. So for instance, I shared that I knew someone whose mother died after getting the vaccine. And they said, well, they probably had an underlying condition or something like that. It's like, it's so sad because we're discounting a death. We're changing the story. We're changing the narrative just by quickly responding. And this happened like 18 months ago when I would share just what I felt or just something about the COVID, and people would either dismiss it, discount it, say, oh, it's just the flu. Okay, so it's kind of like a conversation stopper. Like I was just sharing at the time, I was with some doctors in a class on mind-body issues. And I was just sharing with, and it's like, well, I guess I won't share anymore. Today I was listening to a forum. It looked like something governmental about people who got the vaccine who had bad reactions. And I'll post it. I'm not trying to promote one or another, but it's just an interesting thing that happened. And people all across the forum said, we just don't feel heard. We don't feel that the government is hearing us. They had written letters to the CDC. They wrote letters to their own doctor. They were part of the study for a vaccine. They just feel very alone, it appears, and that no one's listening to them. And yet they were teary-eyed being with other members who had suffered. It was almost, they said it was like a family. It's because I think they each felt heard by their own pain and suffering that they went through in this experience. It seems that the lack of listening or the lack of understanding or connection has made all this worse. I have another person I know who got COVID, who ended up in the hospital. A couple of weeks, ICU, not a good situation for him, except he'll probably take it as good in the end. But when you hear stories and you hear the loneliness, you're alone with your own thoughts. There's no one there to help talk you off the ledge. It just feels very alone. He did say that this, what really helped was connection with people through technology. So I'll jump to my childhood. One of the more painful things I experienced growing up in a dysfunctional family is that there were family members that I just didn't feel heard. I would share something, I'd share a concern, I'd share something that was painful to me, and I felt like it fell on deaf ears, which I'm not trying to put them down. They did the best they know to do. I'm going to adjust this lighting, the things that bother you. Boy, vanity. Okay, there, that's a little bit warmer. I didn't want to look like a ghost. In fact, the term ghosted is a term now when people just totally discount a person to the point where they're just not even going to be heard. They won't respond, sending letters. And you feel so inadequate, like, and this comes back to my childhood, you feel so like your voice doesn't really mean as much as someone else's voice. This adds to anxiety because you just feel alone. Jumping a little bit to the I don't want this to be all a downer because you'd have to listen to this, but let's jump to the solution, and then we'll kind of go back and forth. How many of us have had an experience where someone really just listened? They really cared. And how did they do that? They just listened and they reflected. They said something that fit what you were going through, like they really got it. How many of us have felt that that was like medicine to our souls and our bodies? We felt better. I've been with medical professionals where they're and I've seen it recently, where they're really comforting the person, even though the person's in agony, and I can be in some pain. And they use phrases like, I know this hurts, I'm so sorry, we'll get through this. And it somehow makes it better. And then I also saw nurses that just turned a person over with no listening to what the person was saying or doing. And it made me very mad to see that, really mad. I calmed myself down. I didn't say anything to the people that were doing this to my mother. But I talked with staff. And actually, in this case, I felt heard. I felt that they were going to talk with the people involved and that they would somehow make it better. I myself tried to figure out, well, maybe from their point of view, they're so overwrought with too many people and they just don't understand. And they didn't know my mother. Yeah, I think there's a sense of trauma when you just feel like you're not being heard, whether that's a government saying something and they're not listening to the people. I think a lot of us might identify with that. How many of us really feel heard by the people that are governing us? And do we feel like if we wanted to say something, they would take the time to listen? How many of us are in churches or groups of people, fellowships, memberships, classroom settings, wherever we are, where we find ourselves in a group of people, and how many of us actually feel heard, like connected to where they understand our situation? Or do we find ourselves in a situation where some of us are going to listen and be connecting and understand our experience, and others are going to discount it? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Jumping into another context, you've heard me talk about 12 steps. 12 steps is very interesting when it comes to the being heard aspect. I'm not sure everybody in a meeting listens to everybody, but these are the guidelines, is that in a meeting, there's something called no crosstalk. What that means is you're not going to share anything back to the person what you heard, which seems like a poor form of communication, but there's no. So if Mary is sharing about how she has challenges with her new medicine, and if someone says, well, I found medicine to be useful, or I found medicine is bad, big pharma and all that, that would be a topic that would cause Mary to feel like don't comment on what I've shared. So there's this understanding that we don't really comment on anything. We don't give advice. Okay. You would think, well, how does anybody ever get well? Well, do the steps, and you can watch another video on that if you're interested. But when you share your heart, and you're only given maybe 3 to 5 minutes in some groups, you have to succinctly figure out what you want to say it. And you'll see head nods. You'll see people, it's not cross laughing, but sometimes there's laughter, and there's a sense that they're laughing with you. I've never been where they're laughing at you, but there's laughing at the situation, and you feel a connection there. That connection helps heal you. Yeah. People that come into therapy with some serious situations, like rough stuff. Like often I go, how would I handle this? I wouldn't. Here I am listening to their story, and somehow they say, I feel better. I feel so much better. And was it because what I said to them? I think sometimes, yes, giving useful information, but or was it something I just listened to and maybe reflected back to them? And we'll talk about active listening. There's passive listening where we just kind of listen, and we have phrases for this. It goes in one ear and out the other, like it doesn't even register. But active listening is actually seeking first to kind of really understand. I'm going to try to use some of the features here. Seeking first to understand rather than be understood. I think a lot of us are, I say us, maybe you don't have this problem, but I think when we're emotional, we're driven by our limbic systems. We want to get our point across, as if that's the most important thing. I got to get my point across. So what does that do for me? Like, what is it that I'm really longing for in getting my point across? I want them to think like me or to do what I need them to do. But I think the first basic thing is connection. That one has to have connection. And we feel like even if they disagree, if they understood what I was trying to say, I'd feel better. I had a difficult situation today. The irony of this is I had to share something with someone where they reached out. They're having a lot of challenges. And yet I have challenges with this situation, and I can't budge on my boundaries. I'll just say it's going to be cost-wise or number-wise what it's going to be, and I can't change that. I can't continue to, in my experience, enable the person's situation by me taking on more than I can do. And so I felt myself really kind of start to get nervous about this. What am I afraid of? That she's going to explode on me or get really mad. But the reality is, it's like I'm doing a podcast on listening. Why not just listen? So I listened to her story. And then I shared what my dilemma is. If I were rich or I could do something else, I wouldn't, but I don't have the ability to change the situation. And I know it's going to be a hardship for her, which I don't like to cause for people, but it's also a hardship on me. And eventually it would become a hardship on her if I don't do something. But somehow it went much better, I think, because I just took the time to listen, to empathize with someone's pain. I do know this, and I'll put on my little professional expert hat here. If people don't feel heard, they're more likely to get angry. They're more likely to explode. And because if I don't hear you now, how can I get you to hear me? By being much more animated. One time I was just reflecting on things, and I realized when people yell, where is it appropriate to yell? and scream. Actually, in a field, if someone's far, far away, hey, bring me lunch. Say like I'm working in the field. Why would I need to yell? Because they're so far away, I feel like I have to yell to help them hear me. And I had this thought, I thought, well, maybe that's why we yell in a room where they can hear us, but we don't feel like, we feel so far away that somehow yelling would somehow work better. It doesn't work. It really doesn't. The other thing about communication is yelling is when there's an emergency. We feel at that point it's better to yell, get out of the theater, there's fire, than to calmly say, hey, there's a fire, everybody needs to leave. People won't get the message the same way. Not that I think we should be hysterical, but there has to be some raise in voice to be able to alert people, to wake them up, to get moving on that. And I think maybe that's why we do it with each other. And then I know people that have hearing challenges, and that's really, I mean, we have a hard time communicating as it is. But to be hard of hearing, and so then there's a lot of yelling. And I'm also convinced that in that situation, it's less about, I mean, if people just took the time to try to understand and try to listen, I think that they would listen. So it's like both sides. If I want to be listened to, I have to do my part to say it in such a way that will help them to hear what my message is. I can't just blame them for not listening, that I can't control them, but what I can do is make choices about how I want to share something. And yeah, we find ourselves in challenging times. I hear a lot of prefacing going on, like a person share. Why do we preface like a book? There's a preface to a book because we're afraid that people will take things the wrong way. So I hear phrases, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, or I'm pro-vaccine, but then they share what they're going to share. And I've heard other people say, well, if they say that, then you can tell that they're an anti-vaxxer. And it's like, this is so unfortunate, because I really believe there are people out there, well, like the people I listened to on this forum, all of them stood in line to get the vaccine to help the rest of the world. A lot of these people were medical people. And you can say this, standing in line to be part of a clinical study is not like a mandate, okay? These people had faith that this was going to help humanity. And then what happens, they do get some difficult symptoms. And now they're in a state where no one will listen to them. And a lot of them are characterized by the label of, well, it's just kind of in their head, or it's psychological or anxiety, which is enough to really make me upset as a person. Like, and I'm not saying all the medical professionals are bad here, I'm prefacing, but they've done a really good job of dividing up body and mind for a long time. And anything to do with emotion or social or looking at the bigger picture, they just don't even know. They've deleted it. They're just not there. They just see things how they see things. And if they can't fix it, then they say phrases like, well, we don't know what causes this. Okay, take this medicine to fix a symptom. And I've been studying mind-body medicine for some time now. I've been afflicted with it myself. A lot of what I'm hearing from these people is a mind-body medicine syndrome. And maybe they can be helped if they connect with that. On that note, people that are in an emergency room or scared to death, they can't walk, they have horrible fatigue, they have heart palpitations, they have tingly, weird vibrations, all this stuff. And to have the doctor just kind of look at them like, okay, does not help. And somehow to have that pain discounted because it's like not real pain. Dr. John Sarno, who was one of the pioneers in the mind-body medicine field, said that his feeling is that, and pain's all really subjective, but he said that the body wouldn't create such pain as what these people suffer. And that phrase has helped me a lot in my recovery. Now I don't have that much pain, but it seems that repressed emotion, repressed anger, when it goes into the body tissues and causing dizziness and fainting and all kinds of difficult, painful things that scare the person, when they realize, okay, so this is how much pain is over here that's hidden from view. And in that class, almost every one of us had it. Why would you go and study something like that if you aren't afflicted with it? And it was one of the best classes. It was an 8-week course. I mentioned this before. And what helped people? Just listening to each other, knowing that they had suffered too. They have suffered too. When you describe your experience, and they get it because they've been there with their own experience, and they don't really confuse their experience with your experience, but when you really talk with someone, you feel better. It's because of that connection. It's the same thing why people go to 12 steps, where another alcoholic can help another alcoholic, or someone with codependency can really help. A situation where there's family members you'd like to help, but there's nothing you can do because they don't really, you may have shared something in a way that they didn't want to hear it, or we were mean and angry, or we were scared. And there's a lot of codependency going on with people trying to tell people get a vaccine or do this or that. Don't get a vaccine. I've heard it both ways. Like it's gotten crazy, and it's just because people, I think, are scared, and they're people. They're really just people. So certain things, if you're going to try to communicate a message that says maybe a vaccine is a good idea, I have an idea. I need to have a prop here. Let's not have a picture of a shot in the picture of what you're talking about. And I've seen it used for the anti-vax. That doesn't impress me. If someone's talking about the dangers of vaccination and then you see a needle going in, oh, come on. I'm just going to see that as manipulation, that they're trying to manipulate me. And I don't like to be manipulated just as much, on one end or the other. Okay. So then I'll go down this path. I've had thoughts like, well, how stupid can you be if you're trying to communicate something? But is that helpful? If I said that, how helpful is that? I don't think it's helpful. There's two concentric circles, okay? And let's say one of these is influence, and one of these is concern. So if I have small influence with someone, but my concern goes beyond my level of influence, I'm not going to be that effective. So say like a government might have miscommunicated things and gone back and forth and caused distrust. So their influence is really small. They're trying to have a bigger circle of concern. That's, in my experience, is not going to work. You would have to work to make your influence bigger than your concern. And then people will take what you have to say more seriously. And this works in a relationship, teaching situations, counseling situations. If I feel the people I've gone to for counseling, when I really, really feel they really care a lot, how do I get that experience? Because I can see it on their face. I can hear it in their voice. They listen to me. They don't talk as much as I talk, which is, I sometimes wonder, is that healthy? But they listen and then they say a few words, and those few words stick with me the whole week. And those words make me feel better because they put one foot in my court, and they may have their other foot in their court, and they're able to help me expand to more their court, to give me ideas. And this really goes back to another type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. The roots of that are simple in that there were types of challenges people faced where they had chronic suicidality, chronic depression, mood swings, anger. And it seemed to be a common experience that therapists were afraid of such people. There was a label given to such people, and the label made it worse because then you would hear that word and you would go, oh no, well, I'm full. The door's been shut. I don't need that. Do you think that helped the situation for them? No. This woman, I can show this, Marsha Linehan, Dr. Linehan, asked the question. She had used cognitive behavioral techniques with people and said, to the patients, where are we failing you? Which is so ironic because people would say that's the last person you want to ask with these people, because these people would accuse the therapist of not caring enough, loving enough. You're not giving me enough time. It was like a clingy situation. But why not ask? And what did they say? They said, we don't feel heard. We feel like you don't really understand our world. And then if you look back, you go, well, this is what therapy is supposed to be about, is starting with this unconditional positive regard, confidentiality, where you could share anything, with just a few exceptions of child abuse or suicide or something, but everything else gets to stay right here. That's what gives us the space to get better. Well, Marsha Linehan, to her credit, maybe God's providence, took it seriously and developed a type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. The dialectic is, on one side you have my reality, on the other you have outside reality. And it's this continuum that helps me get better by going from my space to expanding reality. The other way to think about it is I might have a emotional mind and a rational mind. And again, therapists saw these people as just very emotional and no rational, but it's like, no, you kind of get what you see. If you look for the rational, it's there. And the collective wisdom from both those minds, you get something called the wise mind. And this type of therapy not only worked, but it from a government and taxpayer point of view, I mean, it saved millions of dollars. She not only presented the therapy, but then she demonstrated that it reduced hospitalizations tremendously. And in my little short career as a therapist, we saw this stereotype as someone with this disorder. It's now not so scary. Because a lot of DBT, as we call it, helps the therapist to maintain good boundaries and self-care and use the same skills for yourself. No, it's really great. DBT is really a great type of therapy. There's very little wrong with it. If we'd applied that to what we're going through with the pandemic, Just understand that when it comes to a vaccination or not getting the vaccine, there's an emotional mind. And if people can be in touch with what does the emotional mind tell me here? And the emotional mind says, and let's pretend I'm vaccine hesitant. The emotional mind would say something to the effect of, I've seen people die from this. I've seen people get sick from this. I know it's there. I don't have feelings for trust for the government when the government says, hey, get this. I've seen facts where they tell us to do this and then they don't. I mean, they told us it's okay to take a cruise. And then, well, that didn't turn out well. Told us to wear a mask. No, don't wear masks. So all this dishonesty, or at best, we could call it communication problems, but I think it's somewhat just dishonest. Now I'm going to trust. And then, and additionally, have I trusted big pharmacy companies in general to do wise, or not wise, but accurate research? No. I'm not trying to put them down here because there's loved ones that work in the industry, and I think they have a heart of gold, and I think that it's not all bad, but I'm just demonstrating I have a history of seeing the bad stuff. And I talked with other professionals, and you can tell they either don't want to hear it because they believe in just pharmacy to fix all our problems. And again, emotionally mind for them is their whole career may have been based on giving medication, and to find out that in the long term, in some studies, it doesn't work. Anyway, all that backdrop to, now what is well, let's add in a little bit. Let's say that I'm also in this state of emotionally being afraid of getting the the coronavirus, and all that entails. Well, then I might be more open to, I better analyze this from a logical point of view and see what the data is on both sides. Maybe because it's a risk either way you go. I can tell you this, having kind, compassionate, non-judgmental, non-reactive people to talk about this reduces anxiety. There's no boundary crossing to try to make me do something that they want me to do. No, it helps you sort things out. And those friends are like gold. Those professionals are like gold. And that tool will carry them a long way. And that's what I kind of want. The purpose of this is, how can we be gold? How can we be that person who listens and doesn't confuse our stuff with the other person's stuff, to help them sort things out? There's a type of therapy called motivational interviewing. My friends in the drug and alcohol world would recognize this, but it's very powerful. What they learned is that, say like someone comes in, and they really will say, I have a problem with alcohol. They got maybe a discharge from a hospital with liver problems. And in the olden days, the therapist would have said, well, let's help you with that alcohol problem. Well, I'll make this more succinct. I should probably do a whole other episode on it, but it's called motivational interviewing, or MI. The therapist would have actually helped them with their goal, taking them at face value. Well, okay, let's work on alcohol. Without knowing it, the therapist did not realize the person actually had ambivalence. They want to give it up, but they kind of want to keep it. And if they kind of go, well, let's help you give it up, well, unconsciously, the person would hold on a little bit tighter to this. When they come in, they're presenting with, oh, I want to give it up. The first session, oh, I got to give this up. By the second session, and this is so classic, this is so stereotypical. Yeah, I might have alcohol, but I'm not sure it's the full thing. I think it's maybe depression or anxiety. By the third session, almost, they go, I don't know why we're focused on alcohol. It doesn't seem to be the problem. And then they'll just have a gun, hold up a sheet of paper and say, well, you actually wrote it here. You actually were kind of I shouldn't laugh, but it is kind of weird how these things happen. You did have liver enzymes that were elevated, and you were worried about that. And it's like that's the nature of addiction. That once you can float in and out of denial or awareness. So when a person feels safe and validated, and the therapist is skilled enough to see that there's going to always be two ambivalence. There's ambivalence here. There's going to be I want to give it up. I don't want to give it up. And if you help the client sort that out just by being reflective, it works better. Not only does it work better, longer term success rates, and it seemed too easy. I was there during the transition from taking things at face value to getting more motivational interviewing and looking at this. And I just said, I worked with a gentleman who struggled with IV heroin use. It was like not a good thing. And we worked together 4 months. It seemed too easy. How was it easy? Because I just reflected back. See, if I have an unconscious need to try to help him give it up, because that's what my job is, it's going to feel like a boundary crossing. And so I'm actually pushing him more away. So when I'm really ambivalent myself, like it's his life, why am I trying to make him sober? That's not what I do. He sorts it out quicker, owns it, and decides what's best for him. By the way, this wouldn't be a bad idea to do with the treatment choices for coronavirus. Let people sort things out for themselves. We know that doing that type of therapy, this came out of, I think, the University of New Mexico, and the authors, I should know the author's name, but as I get older, they had longer lasting rates of sobriety even after treatment ended. So I use this with a lot of things. If people want to make changes, you help them feel validated and heard and let them sort it out themselves. And you might point out evidence. You might point things out to help them just see the reality of the situation, but without an opinion. So I use phrases like, I'm not going to say you're alcoholic. People say, why aren't you going to tell them? Well, no, that's for you to decide. In fact, I may not even define what it is so much as point to the AA book and say, hey, I do know it's beyond just how much you drink. It's kind of a personality. You could read it and see if it fits. Now, people may go, well, Eric, I've been to see you, and you may seem pushy with that. Where I've got a little bit quicker is the way it is, as I have so many people trying to get in. I may not have that 4 months to help you explore the situation where things are a little bit more pressing now. And so I'm more likely to take someone who's already decided that for themselves, that this is what they need. And so then they get into AA and we may do neurofeedback and then we just jump right into it. And the other people, bless their hearts, but they would just have to do some of that at home, because I've got to take the people that are the most desperate. This comes out of a study, what they call the Stages of Change study. And again, we'll save that maybe for another video, but there were 5 stages. And the second stage was this stage of ambivalence. And if you look about any change in your life, there's this ambivalent state. And the good news is once it's solved, you'll get unstuck and change for good. I think that's actually the name of a book that describes this, by the way. So how does this fit with active listening? It has everything to do with it. Is that if you're going to help yourself or other people around you feel loved, connected, influence, you'll have the influence. Then when you share a concern, you'll be heard. They're going to be able to sort things out better. People want to feel connected. So let's talk about aspects of this. because there's so many aspects of listening. How many of us listen to our own bodies? We listen to what needs to be addressed there. And I think there can be a too attentive to our body where we feel too many aches and pains. But maybe we don't listen enough to find that balance between how much work we should do or when to sleep or when to eat. If we listened metaphorically, it's kind of not hearing a voice, but if we eat too fast, maybe we need to eat slower. And again, it's connecting. That listening is a connecting versus disconnect. And do we discount things? Like, how do we do that? Well, discounting means someone says something, and then say like, this coronavirus really is a serious thing. And if someone says, well, it's just the flu, it's like, okay. And I still hear people say that. And my belief system is I don't think it's just exactly like the flu. Or if I say, well, maybe it's not the flu, but it's a little bit more, then they may counter with, oh, so you're saying, oh, these people are dying from it. Only 1% dies from it. Well, that's still a lot of people. Here's a good case in point. The people that are really, seeing things from the point of view that the coronavirus is really not that dangerous. It's only 1%, etc. Well, then when it comes to the vaccine, where the last time I learned 12 to 13,000 people that died from it, they certainly don't discount that. But in the large, big picture of the millions and maybe billions of people that have taken the vaccine, when I was quoting that number, that was the US, I think 230 million people have taken the coronavirus. That 12,000 is a small figure. So you can't really have it both ways. The way I see it is that you can't discount, well, so many few people, get this. And again, that just doesn't make the listener, the speaker feel heard when someone says, well, it's like saying, well, and this happens. I mean, like when we talk about a coronavirus death, I've heard people say, well, that's what they said. Okay, so the experiences, they may go, well, maybe from their point of view, it wasn't the coronavirus. Then you have other people, when you talk about coronavirus deaths, they say, well, they inflate the numbers. Again, all this really reactive communication just breaks down communication. It just makes you feel unheard, like, well, I don't want to get my head chopped off or just shut down. And discounting does that. In a marriage or a relationship where someone might be prone to what we're called exaggerating or up something 50%, like Chicken Little, the sky's falling. Person goes, the sky's not falling. It's not that bad. Well, I'm really, really feeling not good here. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't think we ought to go to the emergency room. So just a little bit of empathizing with where that person's at might actually cause them to not mark it up 50%. See, one person marks it up 50%, the other person discounts 50%. And it's hard to say what started it. It's kind of like a vicious cycle. Did the discounter discount so much in life as a rule that then the people around them try to exaggerate it? To really listen, it's really a great play. It's a good start to be in this place where you're not going to presuppose anything. You don't really have a template. You don't have an agenda. I've been in situations where family members wanted to kind of have a plan. It's like, no, I don't want to have a plan. I want to just have a flat conversation and just see where something goes. Now, my version of that may not even be better or less than their version. It's just that I know that what works for me is to not really have a plan, but just to listen and just to, I'm not even saying I'm good at this, by the way. but I know what to do, and I've had glimpses of it. And when people feel heard, I don't like the word magic, but something supernatural happens. People feel so much better. Kids feel heard by their parents. Parents, this is a common one. I heard this week. A person who tried to commit suicide. And this is a common thing. People say, well, they were just doing it for attention. Well, you think so? You think so, huh? If a person's in so much pain, the only way they know to try to get attention to be heard is to try to hurt themselves to do it. Okay, now, if they do it over and over, their message may be less and less heard because they're marking it up, and then people discount. I think what they're trying to say is contrast that from the person who really is, well, they're both suicidal, they're just different types of suicide. The suicidal situation where the person really wants to die, doesn't want to bother their friends or family. This is not a cry for help. They've just decided in their mind that they're going to end this life. It's too painful. And that's a serious, well, they're both serious, but that's the scariest one because they're not going to tell you. That's why it's always appropriate for therapists to ask questions like, have you felt suicidal? And I had a couple of situations where people say, well, I already told you. Yeah, no, it doesn't really matter because things change. And I'm so glad to hear that the person says, no, it's not that bad. Great. Okay, but if I don't ask, I don't know. Yeah. But see where it gets? If people don't feel heard, they may go to violence to try to be heard. Okay. In my I don't know, search, but just it happened that I stumbled across an interview with Margaret Mead and James Baldwin. I'll probably put a description in. It was a rap, they called it, on race. This is some time back. There's an actual video on YouTube of this. It's probably an hour and 40 minutes. I will be honest, I haven't listened to it yet, but I want to listen to it. Why is this so interesting? Well, this happened some time back. James Baldwin, my understanding, limited understanding, was a African-American writer. I've seen lots of quotes by him. And then Margaret Mead was, we'll say Caucasian, a white anthropologist. They just shared information back and forth on a difficult topic. And it seemed to be honest conversation. And then when I heard the word rap, I had not thought of this in years. But as a kid, when I was starting to get interested in psychology from my own painful life, as a junior high person, I was part of a rap group. Yes, now this is what's funny. Rap group today means something completely different. Well, it's probably related. It did not involve anything musical. A rap group was a group, kind of like a group of students that could talk openly and honestly. Today, we call it a therapy group. But yeah, I realized I had not heard that word. And that's why the book, A Rap on Race, was, and so I looked it up. Yes, everything flooded the market when I was in my search on rap groups and rapping. And it's probably related, meaning it's very communicative, and rap kind of relates to rapt attention, but it meant blunt, frank, honest communication. That's what a rap group was. Today, we probably use the phrases like frank and confidential and honest, trying to get your really strong feelings out. And they had set limits on how you could talk, and every member was respected. In a way, it wouldn't hurt us to have a rap group on the coronavirus or the pandemic or the government influence or what is their role. But instead, we have shouting matches. We have I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem. We have people saying things that are so inflammatory that their ears just shut. As soon as they hear the phrase, this is my guess, I don't know, but if they say, well, I'm not anti-vax, and then the ears begin to close, it's like they're going to be anti-vax, aren't they? Don't try not to do that. That's just similar to racism. When someone is saying something and we just start to prejudge, and let's not be too hard on ourselves. This seems to be the affliction of all of us. And it comes back to listening. Do I want to listen to these negative thoughts, or do I want to shoo those thoughts away, get rid of my prejudice, and not listen to what I consider, verbal garbage or toxic thoughts? In the spiritual tradition, the word is logos me, assaulted thoughts from the enemy. The Christian church had talked about that for 2,000 years. And that would be a good thing about how to deal with such thoughts. And the tricky thing is the thoughts aren't even our own. So we're encouraged to listen to some things and to not listen to others. But back to what we're talking about is this: if we can just stay open, check in with ourselves, being able to be honest and to talk in such a way that's not mean, but honest, and not be afraid to speak, because I believe that the lack of freedom to speak is actually going to have negative consequences. Here's how: is that it's so subtle. It's like this phrase, well, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I would say, well, if you can't say it nicely, then try to figure out a way to say it nicely in a way that's going to have influence. But if we go, well, why should I say anything to these people? Because they don't need to know and they're not going to change their mind. Well, my goal isn't to change their mind, but just to have a discussion. Because otherwise, there's just going to be more tribalism, more camps dividing. And we just don't want the conflict. And my experience with some conflict is if you don't deal with it at a small level, it's much more difficult later. And so it makes me think, maybe there's some people I should respond in love by sharing more information with them. And so not involve a conflict, to have a dialogue, to be able to discuss things back and forth in a way that's peaceful and kind. And it's okay to have separate ideas. Oh, so this rap on race, it's a very interesting interview because people remarked about how Margaret Mead and James Baldwin was able to just have a frank discussion, each respecting each other's opinions, each actually walking away from, I can't speak for them, but it appears that we walk away more fruitful, that we carry away something from it. We're open to ideas. And so what can we do? I think be open to listen, slow to speak, okay? Quick to listen, slow to speak. For those who are into Bible study, if you look up the word listen, you're going to see all over the place verses that talk about listening to God, trying to hear his voice. My sheep know my voice. And not just hearers, but doers only. You're going to hear phrases like dull of hearing, like they have ears but do not hear, and it's all dulled. And then you're going to see other side where God hears us, our cry, our complaints, helps us. And we never want to be tricked into thinking that our voice is not heard by him. He has so much love and compassion for us, it's unimaginable. We just have to let our requests be made known to him, or there seems to be a thing where we actually have to verbalize and say help. And we'll get help if we're open to help. We can pray for wisdom in such difficult times rather than relying upon our own wisdom. I think Active listening has a spirit of gentleness approach about it. It's, if we're talking brain process, compassion is the front part of the brain. I mean, there's other parts, the limbic system a little bit, but there seems to be a lot of thoughtfulness to be able to think ahead. If I say it this way, will it cause a breakdown in communication? How can I use softeners? How can I just be silent and just listen? And how can I be aware of what my feelings are and take care of those feelings at the same time listen to someone else's story? I use this a lot. I understand that there must be a story as to how they got to a place where they are, rather than judge them. I may differ with their opinion, but to understand there must be some story as to where they are, and to respect that story, and to respect that this is another phrase I use, and it's hard to believe sometimes, but everybody's doing the best they know to do. Even governors, even presidents. How is my judging them going to actually help the situation? How can I be useful to them? Probably not adding to the fight. Actually, this is a postcard. I shared this before, but I like this. The power of stepping away. So just not adding to all that, just by being quiet. Think of this as a whole argument, starting a fire. Just like, how do I just step away from it and not add to it? Even thinking negative thoughts. But even like stepping away from a group situation and not being partaking of it. So this is kind of divided up into two live streams, because how does this really relate to anxiety? Well, I've set the stage for something, but we've got to listen to people, and we'll probably, if we feel heard, our anxiety will get better. If I try to make my point be made known in a controlling way, and I have anxiety about that, if I just step back, be quiet, just listen, not only will my influence increase if they really feel heard. And active listening, I need to kind of begin to wrap it up here, but active listening is as simple as just really listening. You can't talk too much about it. You just got to practice it. And then you repeat back to the sharer what you feel like they were saying, with phrases like, so what I hear you're saying is that for you, the vaccine is a really good idea. Or what I hear you saying is, for you, the vaccine, you have really strong concerns about it. If you can repeat back something of value that was important to them that they shared, really good idea. It works really well. You can repeat back in a parroting way, which is okay. You have to be careful with it because it sounds therapist-like. But it could be like, oh, so you're saying that. I smiled because my dear wife made me a sandwich, and I said, hey, do we have jelly? She said yes, but then she put jelly on my sandwich, and I said, well, I didn't want jelly, especially this type of rose. It was rose jelly that was kind of just like sweet syrup. She said, well, you asked. I said, well, it's not the same as saying I want. I felt bad, and right before a podcast on listening. But yeah, just taking, not jumping, not filling in extra stuff. And I'm not trying to use my wife as an example. There's many times I can fill in too many things. No, just staying in the state of, I don't have a template here, but just repeating back the content, like, oh, so we're going to be there at 2. Okay, so we should leave at 1:30. Okay, so that actually is just good, clean communication. And this goes back 30 years to Robert Kharkov, The Art of Listening, The Art of Helping, I think it was called. It's a book that really broke down all these different steps. And it's not a bad thing to experience. In fact, my son was studying this. Some things haven't changed. But you can respond to the meaning of the communication. So the meaning might have to do with, so yeah, you want us to get there by 2 because you don't want us to be late because it's embarrassing walking in, right? And the person goes, that's right. That's why I like to be there on time. Okay, got it. And if you crank it up a little bit more, then it has to do with the emotion of it. And if people have their emotions validated, you'll have a strong connection. And I think that we're not getting that when it comes to the vaccine mandates or people's concerns about the safety of the vaccine or the efficacy of the vaccines, what they do, what they don't do. I mean, who knows? They keep changing. The dangers of the Delta variant, people losing jobs. I will say this is that people have had a first frontline experience with something, have a story to tell. And when people are on the periphery, making judgments about things, thinking that they know what they know, and this looks like a judgment, but it's something I came to realize, is that would irritate me. Like I realized why am I so frustrated with some of my friends? Not not in a bad way, but there's some friends that I'm just frustrated with, and it's because I'm working with one person after another that has some really difficult situation with the COVID virus, where someone's died or they had a family member. You hear that. And then to have someone out who was just like the flu, that just makes me upset because there's such a disconnect. And do they want to hear the story? And if they saw it front line, they may have a different experience. And it's similar to maybe a missionary goes to another country and then people in America saying, I'm starving, when's lunch? It's like, you have no idea what starving is. And so that helped me a lot, just to have that insight, that thank you. Now I understand why there's such a disconnect. My therapist friend seems to get it because a lot of us are in the similar boats. And what's my tendency is with clients, they each come in and one may think that this is totally made up. It's a ruse from the government, and just totally doesn't want to participate in any social distancing. And I don't say that to their detriment. It's just where they are. Then you have the other people who come in, and when you share, well, we have a government mandate that says you have to be vaccinated whether you want it or not. The person says, well, good for them. It's like, wow. So I see both sides, and you almost feel like if people could each share their experience, just listen, we'd be somewhat more closer in the middle than we are. So anyway, I've gone on enough. I use the word irony a lot, but the irony is I'm talking a mile a minute about listening. So with that, I'll let you go. Be in peace. You take care of yourselves. And if you want to leave comments or questions or anything, just go ahead and, let's see. Oh, wow. Okay. Before I go, it looks like we had someone connect. Yeah, I'm going to post this. We have Aaron, Justina, Mary McDonald. Um, I'm going to post this in the link, but it's Rap on Race. It's a YouTube video with Margaret Mead and James Baldwin. And it looks like the book, but then you actually get to hear their voices. I think that's interesting, and look at it from the aspect of just listening to how they talk with each other rather than to each other. The video before that was a senator who brought up a number of people that had been part of the trials, and I'll post that as well. I just listened to their stories without trying to have any prejudgment, but I felt myself start to think, wow, this looks like these people might be helped with mind-body medicine. Yeah, another one last thing is, see, my mind goes down to the I-thou relationship, which Martin Buber, a Jewish philosopher, talked about. I-thou means you are important to me. Think Mr. Rogers, that he saw people as not even people, but as individual persons. You felt special, you felt heard. It is where people become a number, they become a statistic, they become a constituent. And that's what triggered this thing for me. It's like when I say, well, someone so died, well, that's their family member that died. Well, they just have that. It's like, please don't discount, please don't do that. That just makes me feel sad on either side. Because some of the people that are touting, don't get the vaccine, it will kill you. How many people are going to die because they didn't get the vaccine because you posted something like that? And you show picture after picture after picture of all these deaths. That may be true, but is that manipulating? And is it really interfering with their own relationship with God to figure out what's best for them? So it became clear to me that some people will be saved by such a video of don't get the vaccine. Because there's a few people that could have died and they didn't get the vaccine and they lived through it. On the other hand, there's people that may die because they didn't get the vaccine. That's what I will say, is having worked with someone that had been hospitalized, he said there was not one person that did not wish they had gotten the vaccine that are in the hospital. Okay. Now, the flip side is true. How many people are just saying, you better go get the vaccine. Shame on you. You're trying to kill everybody. Okay. Some people are going to die because they ran and got the vaccine without praying and thinking through the research and looking at all the alternatives. But some lives may be saved as well. So then I began to think, I don't want that responsibility to do something that would cause someone to go down this path or that path. I believe in giving some good information, but I can't tell someone. And I had a friend tell me, well, we got to tell this person to get the vaccine. It's like, no, I'm just gonna let this person be sorting it out themselves. Yeah. And as I was starting to share some other things, either they wanted to listen or they didn't want to listen. And I'm not putting this dear friend down. It's just that this is where we started to realize, can we just listen to each other? So anyway, there's my second goodbye. You take care. There is a chance that tonight I'll do another live stream. And the reason is because I did one last week. I thought I had unlisted it because I felt like it went too far in a direction that I wouldn't think would be useful to most people. So I'm going to redo it. We're going to be talking about deletion, distortion, and generalization, and how that helps anxiety. Take care. Have a good one. Since this is new, I need to figure out how to leave the stream. Oh, there's the button.